Okay, all right. So the functioning of hard disk is clear to everyone, right? How it works. So we were discussing about two kinds of workloads, random workload and sequential workload. So we said that whenever we have to read the data from hard disk, it is best if all the data is stored sequentially, because in that case you won't have to move your read write head again and again. The platter will be rotating and you could read the data. So let's look at the difference between the two. So let's say let's consider this particular hard disk here. Just a second, I should open it from here. Yes. So let's take a look at this particular hard disk over here, right? So if you look at the transfer speed, max transfer speed of this hard disk, it is 125 megabytes per second. But if you look at this speed, it is given to you in terms of sequential access. That is, if you are reading a block of data or many blocks of data which are situated sequentially on the hard disk, this is going to be your speed. Let's see how the speed will change if you are reading 4 KB from some random location in the disk, right? So first 4 KB they are at some place in your hard disk. Next 4 KB they will be situated at some other place. Next 4 KB at some other place. So in that kind of a workload, your overall speed of the hard disk will reduce. So let's see how much it will be. So see what will happen. So previously in the case of sequential workload, you read 4 KB. For reading next 4 KB, you do not require any rotation. You do not require any movement of the read write head. So it's always going to be the same rate, 125 megabytes per second. But in case it is random, so after reading 4 KB, you will have to move to some other place in your hard disk. After reading that 4 KB, again you have to relocate yourself. So how much time will it take? So there will be additional time added here. So what I'm trying to say is, in the case of sequential workload, if you look at your total input output time, and if you remember that formula which we looked at yesterday, so in this case your total input output, it will be equal to your transfer time. If we are talking about the sequential workload, in random workload, you will be adding your seek time as well as the rotation time here. So it will be your seek time plus your average rotational delay, which is also the rotational latency, plus whatever is your transfer time. So you can remember that this will happen in the case of sequential workload and this happens for random workload. So what happens in this particular case? What is the average seek time? It is 4 milliseconds. Can you calculate the rotational latency and tell me how much it is? So speed is given to you 15,000 rotations per minute. Now what is the rotational latency? 2 milliseconds, right? Can others calculate it quickly? Does everyone agree? Right, so 15,000 rotations in 1 minute, which means in 60,000 milliseconds. So one rotation in 4 milliseconds. Rotational latency is 4 by 2. Right, so 2 milliseconds for this. And what is the time for data transfer in milliseconds? So see, we are transferring 4 kilobytes of data. Right, so how much time will it take? For 125 megabytes, it takes 1 second. So how much will it take for 4 kilobytes? If you compute it, it will be very, very less, even in terms of milliseconds. You can actually compute it and you will see 1 by 2 raised to the power, some big power sitting in the denominator. So this time will almost be negligible. So it will be 0.0000 something, right? You can actually calculate it. So this time which will compute, it will be almost equal to 6 milliseconds, right? So for 4 kilobytes, it takes you 6 milliseconds. So again, you can compute the transfer speed here. So in 1 second, how much data can you transfer? 6 milliseconds, it is 4 kilobytes, right? So if you compute for 1 second, can you do that quickly? Tell me how much it is. Uh, 6 milliseconds means 6 by 1000 seconds. It is 4 into 2 raised to the power 10 bytes. We are looking for 1 second. So it's going to be 4 into 1000 into 2 to the power 10 divided by 6 seconds. This much, right? And if you look at this number, you see it is very close to 1024. So So you can actually replace this 1000 here. You can approximate it to 2 to the power 10, which is 1024. Right? This entire thing 2 to the power 10 into 2 to the power 10, it is 1 megabyte. So how much is it? It's close to 4 by 6 megabytes, which is 0.66 megabytes. So you see, if your workload is random, it drastically reduces the speed of your hard disk. It's actually 125 megabytes per second, but if your workload is random, it just became 0.66 megabytes per second. In case you are doing random workloads, you are handling random workloads of 4 KB. And think about what these random workloads are, just a size of a sector, means after every 512 bytes, you have to relocate to some other place. This rate, it will reduce all the more further. Okay, now the question is, can we have these sequential workloads? So although we said that when we are storing the files on our hard disk, we can store the file sequentially, and then whenever I'm reading a very big file, we can always do it sequentially. But do we do it that way is the question. So if we have a particular file, let's say a very big file, 4 GB file, let's say you have, and it's the responsibility of operating system to decide where exactly will it go and sit in which sectors in your hard disk. So should it be stored sequentially or should it be stored in some other manner? So we'll talk about that in a while. And you will realize we actually do not store these files sequentially. It's just like how you scatter your processes in the main memory, you also scatter your files in the hard disk. So your one file, it is not present at one particular place in the hard disk. We'll see why. And the reasons are the same. Exactly why we were doing it for main memory, because of the same reasons we do it with the disk as well. So assuming that most of the time our workloads will be random, so if you look at the read write head, it will be moving up and down all the time, right? It will be doing one seek in one track, and then it will be doing another seek in another track. So there will be a whole lot of seek time added here. So generally, as we discussed, seek time, it is much larger than your rotation time. So considering the seek time, the objective of the operating system now becomes to reduce this seek time as much as possible. So let's see how we can reduce the seek time. So assume that there are certain processes running, and all those processes, they require to access some particular sector in your hard disk. So these are the requests which your processes have issued, and the numbers which you see here, they are the track numbers. Right, so this is right one particular platter. So the first request is 82, track number 82. So let's say track number 82 is somewhere over here, right? The next request is for track number 10, which is somewhere over here. So some sector on that particular track. So we can always add the rotational latency for that. But right now we are more concerned about the movement of the read write head. And then next request is for track number 50, somewhere over here, then 190 somewhere over here. Now what should we do? How we are going to serve these track requests. So one idea is to just serve these requests in the order in which they came. Right, then how much? So assume that going from one particular track to the adjacent track takes you, let's say, 1 millisecond. So 1 millisecond is the time your read write head takes to go from one track to the adjacent track, maybe on the left side or the right side, doesn't matter. So can you calculate like how much time will it require to service all these requests? Assume that the rotational delay is negligible. So how much seek time is required here? So you serve track number 82. So I'm going to draw it like this. So see, let's say this is track number 0, then this is track number 1, track number 2, track number 3, 4, 5, 6, so on and so forth. So I'm just going to draw this same line here. Right? So it is your track number 0, track number 1, track number 2, all the way. Let's say we have some 200 tracks on a particular plateau. So we have 199 tracks. The first request which came is for some track number 82 over here. Next request which came is for track number 10, right? So your read write head will now move all the way to your track number 10. How much time will it take? 72 milliseconds, right? So assuming it to be 1 millisecond for one adjacent track. And next request which you serve is for 50th track, let's say, which is somewhere over here. Then you go to the 190th track, then you go for the 80th track, so on and so forth. So can you compute the total seek time here and tell me how much it is? 592. Sorry. 602. Okay. Someone verify this. Six not two. What went wrong? Try to use a calculator. We can see. So this is what? 82 minus 10 plus 50 minus 10, which is 40, plus 190 minus 50 plus 140 plus 190 minus 80, 110 plus 10. Oh, I did a mistake. Anyone else getting 602? And we'll log this. So you just have to do that calculation here, right? 82 minus 10 plus 50 minus 10 plus 190 minus 50, so on and so forth. $72, $40, $140, $110, $10, and then an $80, then an $30, and then a $120. Add all this. $110, $10, $80 and $30 is $110, $120, $602, right? Yeah. So this is 602 milliseconds in this particular case. Now, what your operating system can do is, so see, when these requests are coming, right, it will take you some time to serve these requests. So these requests, they are stored for a small time. Right, so when you store these requests and before you are going to serve these requests, you can actually permute this sequence. Right, you can change the order in which you are serving these requests. So let me ask you, so our purpose here is to reduce the seek time. So in what way should we permute it? Any ideas? So the point is I can request I can serve any of these requests at first. Right? The point is to serve all these requests, but in any order. So what should the order be? Can you sort of come up with an algorithm for designing a permutation or for designing an order such that you minimize the seek time? The difference should be minimum, right? We can do that. So see, from 82, instead of all the way going to 10 and serving the requested track number 10, why not go to 80 first and serve it? Right. So it will be a seek time of 2 milliseconds from 82 to 80. And then after 80, maybe we can go to 90. So it will add up plus 10 to that. So the first approach which we discussed, that was again the most basic one, first come first serve. Whichever request comes first, it gets served the first time. The second approach, what we can do is whenever you are at a particular track and you have to serve the next request, also remember that all these algorithms, whether it is about demand paging or this one or CPU scheduling, all of these are online algorithms. What is an online algorithm? But the data keeps coming, right? You do not know your entire input beforehand. So it is always possible that when you are serving these requests, you are going to these particular tracks, there are new requests coming in your system. Right? So FCFS is always the most basic one. Whatever comes, you serve it. Whatever comes next, you serve it next. Shortest seek time first. So whenever you have a request, go to that particular track, serve it. Now you have a number of pending requests. To serve the next request, just look at whichever track is the closest to the particular track where you are at and then serve that. Once you are done that, again look at all the pending requests and do the same thing. Right? So if we use that technique here, how much can we reduce our seek time? What the seek time will be? So how we are going to do it in this case? So let's again take it here. So currently let's say we are at 82, right? Next we are going to go at 80. So it is 2 milliseconds here. From 80 to 90, where will we go from 90? So this one is done, this is done, this is done. So here we are assuming that no new requests are coming with time, just for the sake of simplicity to understand the examples. Okay, where after 90? 50. Okay. 20, 10, and then these requests are pending, right? So you can go all the way to 140 and then 170 and then 190. Can you compute the seek time now? Again, assuming it to be 1 milliseconds for adjacent tracks. To 82. Right? So see the reduction from all the way to 602 milliseconds, we came down to 282 milliseconds. So we reduce the seek time, but what can be a possible problem with this approach? Yes, so here we made a long jump from 10 to 140, right? And why is that happening? So in this particular case, you see we have sort of, so we are making an assumption here. The assumption we have is these are the only requests we have. So we are not considering the other requests which are coming with time. So assume that there are more and more requests coming with time, right? And all these requests, assume that they are uniformly distributed. So randomly at any of the particular tracks, you can have a request. So what will happen? So see, when you are serving for 50, 20 and 10 here, in this case, we made a jump to 140, right? But what if there were more and more requests coming here, right? So 50, 20, 10, you will be serving something here first. So see, when you serve till 10, this is what is pending, right? 140, 170 and 190. But assume that before you could serve these particular tracks, there came a request for, let's say track number 15, you will serve that. Track number 25, you will serve that. And then there are more requests coming in the same area, you are going to serve them. What will happen? Eventually, you will never end up in the other part of your platter. So do you see there can be a problem of starvation here? And so you'll always try to only serve those requests which are nearest. And you'll always try not to go far away. But then what will happen to those tracks which are far away? You might end up never serving them. Right? So it can lead to a starvation. So any other approach which we can use apart from FCFS to reduce the seek time. Something like round robin. Okay.
Time to which we haven't access to our people to the right of AC, then we switch for temporarily switch for
So we can use that idea. So what's the idea of round robin? It is fair serving, right? An equal priority to everyone. How can we implement something like round robin here? So can I do something like you start from one part of your platter, let's say track number 0, and just keep moving at a constant rate, right? From one track to another, one track to another, and whichever tracks come in between which requires a service, you can just service that. Right. So that is another algorithm. So another intuition for this is look at FCFS. So you are coming down from 82 to 10. When you are coming down from 82 to 10, there are certain requests sitting in between them, right? So there is 80, there is 20, right? Why not serve them in between? Right? Why to just go from 82 and then come to 10 and serve it? If you have something in between which requires a service, you require to stop at those tracks, you can do that. Right? So combining both of these ideas, fair serving and this one, we can use something which is called an elevator algorithm. So you can just have your read write head move from this part to this part, from your first track to the last track, and then come from the last track to the first track, again go back, and whatever keeps coming on the way, you can service that. But then you need to take care of one thing here. So let's say you are currently at 82, right? And let's say you are moving towards the right side. So the read write head is moving towards the right side. What is the next request that we will service? 90, right? So 82 to 90, and then Again, moving towards the right side, what will be the next one? 140, right? 140. So on and so forth. You go all the way towards the last track, which is 199, and then you come back. Now, one thing to note here is, let's say you just serve 90 and you are moving, the read write head is moving towards 140, and at that time there comes a request for, let's say, track number 88. Right? So we are not going to go back and serve that, just like how it happens in an elevator. So you can just keep that in the queue for the time, and then when you will come back, you can serve those requests. So can you calculate the seek time here? So 82, 90, 140, 190, but then you will go all the way till 199, which is your last track, and then come back. So when you come back, for this particular case here, till 82, you will have no particular track to serve, and after that you will be serving your remaining tracks. You compute the seek time. So we have 82, and then I don't know the answer, so that's a problem. Someone else need to verify. Is it 299? So 82 to 90, 90 to 140, 140 to 170, 170 to 199, and then when we come back, it will be 80, which all are done. This is done, this is done, this is done. And then 50, and then 20, and then 10, right? And then we can stop at 10. So how much is the seek time? Can you compute quickly, anyone else as well?
So sorry, 297.
290. Okay, something around 297 or 298. Right. It's fine. Something along these lines, right? So it is still greater than your shortest seek time first, right? But again, it won't have any problem of starvation. Right? Next, we have one. So this elevator algorithm, it is also called scan algorithm. Now we have a variant of the scan algorithm, and let's think about why even you would have that kind of a variant, and that variant is called C-scan. What C-scan does is, so see, till here it is all the same. So you are moving from 82, you move towards right, you service the last track. After servicing the last track, you come back, but while coming back, you do not serve anything. So after you are done with 199, you just move to the 0th track back again, and then you again start scanning from the 0th track. Right? And the question is, why will you do something like that? It's just adding more seek time here, right? You're coming all the way from 199 to 0. That time we are not serving anything. So adds a seek time of 200 milliseconds maybe. And then again, you are scanning and serving the other request. So why will you do that? Any idea? So generally this happens because of some of the physics involved behind your hard disk. So there are more complications there in how your read-write head it actually works. So when you look at a read-write head, its speed it's not constant when it is going from your 0th track to the 199th track. It is something like what happens with a car or what happens with a bus, right? It accelerates, and then when it is somewhere in the middle, the speed would be the highest. When it has to serve something, it has to slow down, then again it can pick up speed, and there are things like that. So the idea here is, when you come, so assume that there are a million tracks, right? And you are coming from your 0th track all the way to the millionth track. You just now served whatever request was there at the millionth track. Where will be the maximum number of requests now? Assume it like a dynamic system. There are requests for different tracks coming up. Without assuming anything, assume that all these requests are random, uniformly at random. They can pop up at any request. You can write a random number generator for this. Generates a random number from 0 to 1000. So all these requests are popping up. You just now, let's say, service the request at the last track. By the time you come to the last track, where will be the maximum number of requests which need serving, which are waiting for a long time?
Last track is the outermost track.
Outermost track.
The other things will also be around the most.
Okay, so see it like this. So let's say this is the 0th track, this is the last track, 0th and the millionth. Read write head is coming from here, moving from the 0th track, and it moves to the millionth track. Whatever comes, requests come in between, they are being served. So the moment you have served the request here, which is the part where you see the maximum number of requests? Where will be the hidden? Towards the left, right? Because this is the part which is not being serviced for a long time. This part has just now being serviced. So our objective now will be to serve these requests as quickly as possible. So that is the reason while coming back we do not serve anything, because if while coming back again you serve things, then read write head it will become slow because of serving those requests. So you can just make it very quickly come from the last to the first without any deceleration, and again you start from the same point. So that is something which is also utilized in actual systems. And so this particular algorithm, it is called C-scan algorithm. And then there are again two very small variants to these, which are called the look and the C-look algorithm. Very, very similar to these. So look algorithm just says, so your elevator algorithm is, it will go from all the way from 0 to the millionth track, come back from millionth track to the 0th track, again go back, again come back. What your look algorithm does is, it says do not go till the end. So if you look at this particular example, the last request which we had to serve was 190, right? So if you have served 190, and what's the need to go all the way to 199 if there is no request that side? So once you have hit 199, you just come back from, sorry, not 199. Once you have serviced 190, you come all the way back from there. And let's say here the request which is on the extreme left is on track number 5. So once you have serviced something on track number 5, you can start moving in the same direction. And the difference between look and see look is the same difference which is there between scan and see scan. So what look will do, service everything this side, while coming back also it will service, while going back again it will service. See look, it will not service while coming back. So while going towards the, let's say, outermost track, it will service. While coming back, it won't service anything, and then again it will move towards the right side and service. Right? So we'll solve some numericals for this. They will make the things all the more clear. Okay. One more algorithm which is used in our systems actually, so none of these is actually used in the system. So what has happened with time? Previously your seek time, it was much higher than your rotation time, but with time seek time has also reduced. So seek time and rotation time, we need to consider both of them when we create any disk scheduling algorithms. So what your modern systems use is something which is called the shortest positioning time first. And these algorithms, they will be all the more involved because they'll also be looking at the rotation of your platters. They'll also be looking at how your read write head is moving. And according to that, you'll have to take a call on which particular track to service. And even it is difficult for the system programmers, right? Because these algorithms, they work more at the disk level. So if you look at all these algorithms which we discussed now, this look, C scan, all of these can be implemented in operating system, right? Because these are simple algorithms. But if you talk about something like shortest positioning time first, which requires to have very minute details about how your hard disk is currently working, they come implemented directly in your device driver. So your operating system need not worry about them. So these were some disk scheduling algorithms. We'll now move on and okay, let's solve a few questions first, and then we'll move on to how we store files on your hard disks. Can you solve this? Okay, so your tracks, they are also called cylinders. They are sort of synonymous. So don't get confused. So cylinder is basically like if you consider the tracks of all the platter together, right? So if you look at all the track number zeros on every surface and every platter, right? It's a cylindrical structure. That's a cylinder. 632. Can someone else verify? Six 32. Alright, maybe I can verify. Let me see. How 632 or 326? Hmm? Let's calculate it. Even I don't know, I just this question. So it's currently at 53, right? So 98 minus 53 plus 183 minus 98 plus 183 minus 41 plus 122 minus 41. Correct. 120, 98, 53, 183, 98, 183, 41, 122, 41, and then 122, 14, and then 124, 14, and then 124 minus 65. And I can calculate in this way. Anyone else getting same? 632. I can skip this now. Okay, all right. Okay, this one. 432 or 420 or what was the third option? So your order will be 24 to 26, 26 to 42 or 12? 12. And then 8, and then 4, and then 42. Can you now compute it? 396. So 2, 14, 4, 4, 38. Right? 38 into 40, 48, and 14. 62, right? It's 62 into 6. Okay, there's also a 50 at the end, right? So we add 8 to this, 8 to this. So 70 it becomes, right? 420 then it is, 420. It's 70 into 6. All right. Okay. So enough about the disk. So let's talk about the file system now. So file system in your operating system is that part which is responsible for deciding how your files will be stored on the hard disk. Right? So you have a file which can be 2 gigabytes, and then there is some space on your hard disk sitting in some sectors in some tracks. So you have to decide where exactly will this file go and sit on your hard disk. So how do we do that? So the procedure is very similar to how your processes they sit on the main memory, right? So just how you divide your processes into words and sometimes in pages, right? And then you decide in which particular lines it will go in the main memory. So we do a similar thing here. You divide all your files in blocks. So as we discussed, each block is 512 bytes. Similarly, anyhow our hard disk is in the form of sectors. On each sector, you can store each block. Now all you have to decide is which block goes and sit on which particular sector. And how can we do that? So just coming here. Right. So assume that this is your file, right? So this file is divided into n blocks. So definitely it can so happen that this last block it's not complete, right? Maybe so maybe it's filled just up to there, right? So this much space it will be wasted, right? So internal fragmentation it is always going to be there. N blocks here, and let's say these are the sectors. So we'll assume that every sector on the entire hard disk is numbered on each of the tracks. So every sector has a particular number. So let's say your hard disk has some M sectors. So all the sectors are numbered from 0 to M, and just have to decide which block goes and sits on which sector. So can you propose some techniques before we go and discuss ahead? So it's all algorithmic, right? What all can we do? Okay, so for the moment, let's assume that everything has the same priority. Okay. Okay, so that is the first approach. You start from the, so let's talk in terms of sectors as of now. So assume that you have a very big track, and this track has a lot of sectors. So let's say some 60 or 100 sectors. Right, so we also have to decide how we fill these sectors. So again, maybe we can fill them contiguously. So the idea is you just start with maybe, let's say your hard disk is completely empty. Let's start with that assumption. So how do we go? Maybe you go to the 0th track, you fill the 0th sector on the 0th track, then the next sector, then the next sector. You keep going in the same way. right? That is a sequential allocation, right? That's the one way. What can be the possible problems with that? I didn't get you. Fragmentation. Which fragmentation? External, right? We start having external fragmentation. Let's see how this happens. So for the meantime, we are assuming our hard disk to be something like this. We are just writing all the sectors here. So assume that overall there are 31 sectors. So your 0th sector to 31st sector, every sector can hold one block of your file. So each of your file, so let's say this is a file, the name is count. For each of the file, you notice the which is the starting sector. So we say for your file count, the starting sector is 0, and what is the length of the file in terms of blocks. So for count, it is 2. Right? So count will start at 0th block, it has a length 2, so it will occupy 0th and 1st sector. Right. Similarly, for other files, so let's say the mail file here, it has a starting location of 19 and a length of 6. So it will start from your sector number 19 and it goes up to sector number 24. And so we are storing all the files contiguously. What all problems can we have? So first of all, let's see what all convenience we can have, and then let's also see what all problems can we have. So random versus sequential access, it will support sequential access. So whenever you have to access a particular file, so the same example, let's say there's a 2 GB file, you need to write it or you need to read it, the entire process will be very quick, because you do not need to change sectors every now and then, everything is contiguous. So it will give you a very quick sequential access. Okay, what if you have to read a particular block on a file? How easy or difficult it will be? So let's say this mail file, it's starting from your sector number 19 and it's going up to sector number 24. So assume that there is a request which says that it requires third block of this file. So we can directly compute that. So your first block is on sector number 19, so third block will be on sector number 21, right? And you can go to that sector and directly access that. Definitely you have to move that, rotate the disk and move the read-write head if required, right? But still the process will be easy because you can directly compute the sector number of a corresponding block. So your rotation and seek times, they will be very less because it is sequential access. And then definitely, yes, there will be external fragmentation also, because look at this figure. Assume that there is a new file which wants to reside, and let's say that file is having 10 blocks. Right, so overall you might be having 10 blocks here on your hard disk, but they are not contiguous. So if a new file comes, even if you have 10 blocks, you cannot store it on your hard disk. So again, the problem of external fragmentation. And the same problem, what if a file wants to grow? Right? So let's say we have this mail file here, which is sitting from your this 19th to this 24th sector over here. What if, let's say, it wants to grow by 3 blocks? Not 3, let's say 4 blocks. Can you do that? So there are only 2 available blocks here and 3 available blocks here. On one side 2, on one side 3. It wants to grow by 4 blocks. It cannot. And if you need to grow it by 4 blocks, again you will have to take this file from this space to some other space where you have those contiguous, that many contiguous blocks available. So those are the obvious problems with this approach. How can we solve this? So given that we have looked at some kind of memory management techniques, can you suggest some things here? What can we do now to solve this problem of external fragmentation? Okay, how can we implement paging here? Let's think about. Right. So we can do the same thing. So what we can do is we'll just require a separate table. So the idea is you can store any block in any sector, but we should just have a table which tells me which block went and sat in which particular sector. And we can access that table and the table will tell us where to find the particular block. That is one thing we can do. Here is one more thing which we can use, is generally used, is called linked list allocation. And I think so linked list allocation is, so just if there's a file here, right? So corresponding to this file, you have a start location and you You even don't need an end location according to me. You just need a start location. So it tells you in which particular block do you see your, in which particular sector you see your first block. Once you go to the first block, it will have a pointer which will tell you where the next block of the same file is. Right? It's the same thing which happens in a linked list. You go to that block, it will tell you where the next block is sitting. So on and so forth. So the last block, it can have a pointer null. Right? So that will tell you that the file is over. Again, the problems, can we do a random access in such a file? How difficult it will be? So now if we ask the same question, access the 12th block of a particular file, it will become very difficult. Right, first of all, it is not contiguous. So you'll go to the first block. First block will tell you where the second block is. And then second block can be all together in some different track. Right, so you move your read write head, you go there. That will tell you where the next block is. So there will be a lot of movement. Right, so that way it will be inefficient. So again, reading nth block is difficult, rotation and seek time again will increase. But yes, it has solved the problem of external fragmentation. You don't have that problem now because any block can go and sit anywhere. And again, if you have to grow a file, that will be very easy. Even if you want to grow it in the middle, you just have to alter those pointers. Wherever you want to keep new blocks, you can keep them and modify your pointers just like how you do them in the linked list. Okay, now a question. This linked list allocation, why don't we use it in memory management? So I remember when we were discussing about memory management, what all approaches we can have. So one of you suggested that we could use linked list allocation, right? But we didn't discuss it that time. So why can't we use linked list allocation for the management of main memory? Storage is expensive, and the same problem, right? If you have a virtual address, let's say it is this virtual address, it falls in your page number 9. To look at the corresponding frame number, you'll again have to go from, so your first entry is going to tell you where your next page is, right? And then that entry will tell you where your next frame is. We cannot afford to do that with the main memory, right? So we do not have this approach in the main memory. Third approach, and definitely the most used one, is similar to paging. It's just called indexing here. The idea is exactly the same, right? Corresponding to each file, any block can go and sit in any sector, but then you have a table which tells you which block is sitting in which sector. And you also now need to store this table, just like you stored the page table. Where do you store it? So you can store it in the initial few sectors for a file. Right? So before you start with the content of a file, you can store this index. And then whenever you have an, let's say, a request for block number 10, you can look in this index, you can see where is the block number 10 in which sector. You can go to that sector and access that particular block. Okay, what problem we can have here? So if you look at this index, right, just like your page table, the size of the index can be very big. Let's say there's a file and it has a whole lot of blocks, and similarly your size of index will increase. So it is very much possible that many a times you will not be able to store your index on just one sector. You might require multiple sectors to store the index, right? And then again it sort of becomes contiguous memory allocation for the index, right? Just like how we were doing it in page table. So many a times it was not possible to sort of squeeze your page table in a single page. Similarly, it's possible that you are unable to squeeze your entire index on a single sector. So let's say you are using again 10 sectors for this particular index, and then as the size of the indices become big, again the problem of external fragmentation will pitch in. So again, what you can use, something like multi-level paging, you can use multi-level indexing. Right? So you can index an index. We'll talk about an example in a while. All right. So the, okay, we are up on time. So we'll discuss 2 examples in the next class. Yes.
We use the combination of the space. So we have the stable allocation, and the moment that we run out of space in the container allocation, we have a pointer in some other location.
We can do that also.
We have this sequential time.
Come again.
You have good transfer time and sequential time. You had like a mixture of the first.
We can always do that. So see, if you look at your modern operating systems, they might actually not actually using any of these approaches. Right? So even if we talk about disk scheduling algorithms, there was a research paper in I think 2012 titled Self-Aware Disk Scheduling, right, which uses the concepts of machine learning. So all those things, they are ever evolving, but the point is, in a basic course we discuss about very basic algorithms. Definitely what is used is the mixture of all of these. Attendance. You can give me the attendance, or all of you can just log in this Teams meeting and log out. So I can have it from there itself.